I always thought my life with Emily was something carved out of a quiet, unshakable dream. We'd been married 12 years, built a home in the suburbs of Raleigh, North Carolina. With a wraparound porch and a garden she tended like it was her second child. Our daughter, Lily, was 9, all freckles and giggles, and I'd spent my days as a structural engineer, designing bridges that held the world together. Emily was a freelance illustrator, her hands always smudged with charcoal or ink, her auburn hair falling in waves over her sketchbooks. She was beautiful in a way that didn't demand attention, soft, unassuming, mine. Or so I thought. It started with the smallest fracture. A Tuesday evening in late October, the air crisp with fallen leaves. When I came home from a site inspection 2 hours early, the house was quiet, Lily at a sleepover, and I expected to find Emily curled up with her tea and her drawings. Instead, I heard laughter. Not hers alone, drifting from the kitchen. I paused in the hallway, my boots still caked with mud, and peeked around the corner. There she was, leaning against the counter, her head tilted back, laughing with a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, wiry, with dark hair and a sharp jaw, holding a glass of wine. My wine. A bottle I'd saved for our anniversary. They didn't see me. I didn't announce myself. Something in my gut told me to watch. He reached out, brushed a strand of hair from her face, and she didn't flinch. She smiled. A smile I hadn't seen in months, maybe years. One that lit her up like she was 20 again. My chest tightened. I slipped back out the front door, sat in my truck, and waited. An hour later, he left, climbing into a black sedan. I memorized the license plate. JKL 4921. That night, Emily kissed me when I got home, said she'd had a quiet day sketching. I nodded, said nothing about the wine missing from the rack or the 2 glasses I later found in the sink. Lipstick smudged on one. Days turned into weeks, and I became a shadow in my own life. I'd leave for work, then double back, park down the street, watch the house. He came 3 more times that month, always when Lily was out, always mid-afternoon. I started digging. His name was Marcus Reed, a photographer she'd met at an art gallery opening I'd skipped for a deadline. I found his portfolio online, moody landscapes, pretentious self-portraits. I found his address, too. A loft downtown, 15 minutes from our quiet little world. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed to understand how deep this crack ran. Emily had always been a creature of habits. Coffee at 7 a.m., sketching by the window at noon, humming old jazz tunes while she cooked. But now those habits shifted. She'd linger over her phone, thumbs tapping out messages she'd hide when I walked by. She'd leave the house more often. Client meetings, she'd say, though her freelance gigs had never demanded this much FaceTime before. I'd nod, kiss her forehead, play the oblivious husband while my mind churned. I wasn't oblivious. I was cataloging. I bought a burner phone, set up a fake X account, and followed Marcus Reed's posts. He was vain, always sharing glimpses of his life. Coffee shops, gallery openings, cryptic captions like, "Finding light in unexpected places." One photo stopped me cold. A sketch of a woman's hand, delicate and charcoal smudged, unmistakably Emily's, posted with a heart emoji. My wife's hand, drawn by her, displayed by him. Public. I gripped the phone so hard the screen cracked. That night, she came home late, smelling faintly of sandalwood. Not her scent, but his. I'd learned from stalking his loft's trash one sleepless night. I started recording her. Tiny cameras from an electronics store, hidden in the living room, the kitchen, our bedroom. I'd watch the footage after she slept, her breathing soft beside me while I saw her lies unfold. Marcus came over again, the 4th time now. They didn't touch much, just enough. A hand on her waist as he passed her a mug, a lingering look as she laughed at something he said. It wasn't blatant, but it was intimate, a quiet theft of something that belonged to me. I'd sit in my truck afterward, replaying it, my knuckles white against the steering wheel. I hired a PI, a grizzled guy named Tom who smelled like stale cigars and didn't ask too many questions. I gave him Marcus's plate number, his address, told him to dig. Tom called me a week later, voice low over the burner. "They're careful," he said. "No hotels, no public displays. But they've got a spot. An old cabin off Route 54. She's been there twice with him. I've got photos." He emailed them. Emily stepping out of her Subaru, Marcus behind her. The cabins peeling red paint stark against the pines. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I printed the photos, tucked them in my desk drawer, and waited. The cabin became my obsession. I drove out there one Sunday while Emily thought I was at a job site. It was 40 minutes from home, tucked off a dirt road, surrounded by trees that swallowed sound. The red paint was chipped, the porch sagging, a rusted wind chime dangling like a forgotten promise. I didn't go inside, not yet. I just sat in my truck, staring, imagining them there, her sketching, him pouring that damn wine. Their voices weaving together in a space I'd never been invited to. I found a spare key under a flower pot, pocketed it, and left. Back home, I watched her closer. She'd started wearing a silver bracelet I didn't recognize, thin and delicate, twisting around her wrist like a secret. "A gift from a client," she said when I asked, her eyes flicking away too fast. I didn't push. I knew it was from him. Tom had seen Marcus browsing a jewelry shop downtown the week before. Every time she wore it, I felt my jaw tighten. My hands itched to rip it off her. But I smiled, kissed her, played the part. The footage piled up. 5 visits now, always the same routine. He'd arrive, they'd talk, laugh, share a drink. Once, he leaned in close, whispered something that made her blush, her fingers brushing his arm. I froze the frame, stared at it for an hour. That blush, it was mine once, back when we'd stay up late talking about Lily's future, our dreams. Now it was his. I started losing sleep, my reflection in the bathroom mirror growing hollow, bearded, a stranger's face. Tom called again. "They're getting bolder," he said. "Met at a cafe yesterday, sat in the open. She didn't even look nervous." He sent me a photo. Emily in her green coat, Marcus across from her, their knees touching under the table. I thanked him, hung up, and punched the wall so hard the plaster cracked. Lily asked about the hole at breakfast. I said I'd tripped. Emily didn't question it. She was too busy humming, her bracelet glinting as she stirred oatmeal, her mind somewhere I couldn't reach. I needed proof, something undeniable, something I could hold in my hands when I finally faced her. The cabin key burned a hole in my pocket, so I went back. It was a Wednesday, Lily at school, Emily supposedly at a meeting. I drove out, parked a half-mile away, walked through the woods to avoid being seen. The air smelled of pine and damp earth as I slipped the key into the lock. Inside, it was sparse, wooden floors, a threadbare couch, a small kitchen table. But it was theirs. Her sketchbook sat on the counter, open to a drawing of the wind chime. A bottle of that same wine, half empty, rested beside it. I found more. In a drawer, a Polaroid. Emily laughing, Marcus behind her, his chin on her shoulder. On the couch, a blanket I recognized from our guest room, one she'd claimed was lost. In the bedroom, God, the bedroom, a pair of her earrings, the pearl ones I'd bought her for our 10th anniversary, glinting on the nightstand. I stood there, breathing hard, the walls closing in. This wasn't just stolen moments. This was a life they were building piece by piece, in the ruins of mine. I took photos of everything, my hands shaking as I documented their secret world. I didn't touch anything. Didn't want them to know I'd been there. Not yet. Back home, I uploaded the images, added them to my growing file. That night, Emily came home late again, her cheeks flushed, claiming she'd been stuck in traffic. I nodded, poured her a glass of water, watched her sip it while that bracelet caught the light. I wondered how long she'd worn those earrings for him, how many times she'd lied to my face. I started planning. Not confrontation, not yet, but something bigger, something that would unravel them both. I called Tom, asked him to tail Marcus full-time, get me his routines, his weaknesses. "You sure about this?" Tom asked, his voice gruff. "Once you go down this road, there's no coming back." I told him I was sure. I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was a man with a purpose, a cold, sharp thing growing inside me, waiting to be unleashed. Marcus Reed became my shadow life. Tom's reports painted a picture. He woke at 8 a.m., drank espresso at a cafe called Blue Moon, spent his days shooting photos or schmoozing gallery owners. He lived alone, no pets, no family nearby, just a rotating cast of artsy types who drifted in and out of his loft. I learned his habits, his haunts, the way he carried himself like the world owed him something. I'd drive by his place at night, watch his silhouette move behind the curtains, imagine him laughing about me, the clueless husband funding his little affair. Emily grew careless. She'd leave her phone unlocked once, twice, and I'd scroll through late at night while she slept. Messages to M. Can't wait to see you. Missed you today. A photo of her in a sweater I'd bought her. Caption, thinking of you. I saved screenshots, my stomach churning. She'd started pulling away from me, too. Less talk at dinner, fewer touches, her eyes distant. Lily noticed, asked why mommy seemed sad. I lied, said she was just tired. I couldn't tell my daughter her mother was building a new life with a man who wasn't me. I went back to the cabin again, this time with a plan. I planted a camera, small, wireless, hidden in a bookshelf crack. It streamed to my phone, and the first footage came 2 days later. Emily and Marcus, closer now, his hand on her thigh, her head on his chest as they sat on that couch. They didn't do much more. Just talked, laughed, existed together in a way that gutted me. But it was enough. It was real. I watched it on loop, memorizing every second, letting it fuel me. Revenge took shape in my mind, not loud, not messy, but precise. I started small. I mailed Marcus an anonymous package, a photo of the cabin, no note. Let him sweat. I canceled Emily's credit card, the one she used for client lunches, watched her fumble when it declined at the grocery store. Must be a glitch, I said, smiling as she blushed. I wasn't ready to end it yet. I wanted them to feel the ground shift beneath them, slow and deliberate, until they had nowhere left to run. The game had begun, and I played it like a man possessed. Marcus got my anonymous package. I knew because Tom saw him pacing his loft, peering out the windows, his smug confidence cracking. I didn't stop there. I sent another. A single Polaroid from their cabin stash, the one of Emily laughing with his chin on her shoulder, mailed with no return address. Let him wonder who knew. Let him squirm. Emily, meanwhile, grew jittery. The credit card fiasco left her flustered, and I watched her call the bank from the kitchen, her voice tight as she tried to explain it away. I stood nearby, pretending to fix the sink, humming like nothing was wrong. The cabin camera became my lifeline. I check it obsessively, on lunch breaks, in bed while she slept, in my truck before driving home. They went there less often now, maybe spooked, but when they did, I saw the shift. Marcus was tense, glancing at the windows. Emily fidgeted, her bracelet twisting in her fingers. They still clung to each other, though quiet moments on the couch, her sketching while he watched, their little world shrinking under my invisible weight. I saved every frame, a growing archive of their undoing. I dug deeper into Marcus. Tom got me his financials, freelance income, spotty at best, a few outstanding loans. He wasn't rich, just a leech with a camera and charm. I found his landlord's number, made an anonymous call, reported suspicious activity at the loft, late-night visitors, strange packages. A week later, Tom said the landlord had started eviction proceedings. Marcus posted a vague rant on X about vultures circling, and I smiled, sipping my coffee, knowing I'd lit the match. At home, I tightened the screws. I'd forget to pay the internet bill, cutting off Emily's lifeline to him when Lily wasn't around. She'd sigh, call it a hassle, never suspecting me. I'd leave work early, show up unannounced, watch her scramble to explain why she wasn't sketching like she'd claimed. Just needed fresh air, she'd say, her eyes darting. I'd nod, kiss her cheek, let her think she was safe. But I saw the bracelet less often now. She'd tuck it away when I was near, a guilty little secret she couldn't quite hide. Lily became my anchor, the one pure thing left. She'd chatter about school, her drawings, her friends, oblivious to the storm brewing. I'd take her to the park, push her on the swings, and for those hours I could breathe. But even then, Emily haunted me. I'd see her in Lily's auburn hair, her freckles, and wonder how much of my wife I'd already lost. One night, Lily asked why Mommy didn't hug me anymore. I froze, mumbled something about grown-ups being busy, and tucked her in with a story about brave knights. Inside, I was unraveling. I upped the ante with Marcus. I hacked his X account, simple enough with a phishing link sent from a burner email. I didn't post anything wild, just subtle sabotage. Deleted half his portfolio pics, unfollowed his gallery contacts, changed his bio to photographer seeking new muses. His followers dropped. His inbox flooded with confused messages. Tom said he'd overheard Marcus at Blue Moon, griping about tech glitches ruining his career. I grinned, imagining his panic, his precious little world crumbling. Emily felt it too. She'd call him when she thought I was asleep. I'd hear her hushed tones through the bedroom wall, her voice trembling. "Something's wrong," she'd whisper. "I don't know who's doing this." I'd lie still, eyes open, listening as she begged him to fix it, to keep them safe. Safe from me. The irony twisted in my gut. I started leaving hints. His name scribbled on a notepad she'd find. A photo of the cabin taped inside her sketchbook. She'd go pale, stammer excuses, but I'd just smile, say it must have been Lily playing around. I bought a second burner, texted Marcus from it. "I know about the cabin. I know about her." No name, no threats, just enough to rattle him. Tom said he'd seen Marcus ditch his usual haunts, trade his espresso for whiskey. His sharp jaw shadowed with stubble. Good. Let him fray. Let him feel hunted. I wasn't done, not by a long shot. The cabin was my next move. I drove out late one night, the sky black and starless, a duffel bag rattling in the passenger seat. Inside, paint cans, a hammer, a few odds and ends from my toolbox. I didn't burn it down, too obvious, too loud. Instead, I dismantled it piece by piece. I smashed the wind chime, splattered red paint across the porch, cracked the windows with precise, quiet blows. Inside, I tore pages from her sketchbook, scattered them like confetti, poured the wine over the couch. I left the Polaroids pinned to the wall, a gallery of their stolen moments, now ruined. I wanted them to walk in and see chaos, to feel violated the way I had. I checked the camera feed the next day. They showed up as I'd hoped. Emily froze in the doorway, her hands flying to her mouth. Marcus cursed, kicking at the debris. "Who did this?" she whispered, her voice shaking through the mic. He didn't answer, just paced, his face tight with fear. They didn't stay long, grabbed what they could, left the rest. I watched them drive off, her head in her hands, him gripping the wheel. The cabin wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine now, a monument to their collapse. Back home, I played the doting husband. I cooked dinner, her favorite, roasted chicken with rosemary. Asked about her day, watched her squirm as she lied about a gallery call. The bracelet was gone now, hidden or lost, and her fingers twitched without it. I'd catch her staring at me, searching my face for something. Guilt, maybe, or suspicion. I gave her nothing but smiles, small touches, a mask so perfect she couldn't see the rage underneath. Marcus cracked faster than I'd expected. Tom said he'd moved out of the loft, crashing with a friend, his career tanking as clients bailed. I sent him one last text. "You took what's mine. I'm taking everything." He didn't reply, but I knew he'd read it. I pictured him sleepless, checking locks, jumping at shadows. Emily, too, was unraveling. Her sketches stopped, her phone silent, her laughter gone. I'd stripped them bare, and I was just getting started. I turned to Lily's world next. Not to hurt her, never her, but to twist the knife deeper. Emily had always been the fun mom, the one who'd draw with her, take her to art fairs. I started taking that away. I signed Lily up for after-school engineering clubs, ones I'd lead, teaching her to build bridges like me. She'd come home buzzing about beams and bolts, her sketch pads gathering dust. Emily noticed, her brow furrowing as Lily chattered about my world instead of hers. She's growing up, I'd say casual, watching the loss sink in. I fed Emily's paranoia. I'd leave the house messy, papers strewn, photos misplaced, then ask if she'd seen Marcus's name anywhere. Thought I heard you mention him. I'd muse, her face paling as she denied it. I'd hum his favorite jazz tune, the one from his ex-posts, while fixing breakfast, see her freeze mid-bite. She stopped sleeping well, dark circles blooming under her eyes, her hands shaky as she poured coffee. I'd ask if she was okay, all concern, knowing she couldn't admit the truth. Marcus was a ghost now. Tom tracked him to a dingy apartment across town, said he'd sold his camera gear to pay rent. I mailed him a final package. A photo of Emily and me from our wedding, smiling, with "She's still mine" scrawled across it. Let him choke on that. His ex went silent, his life a husk. I'd taken his art, his home, his muse. Emily felt it too. She'd call him, get no answer, her voice breaking in the night as I pretended to sleep. I started rebuilding my life in front of her. New hobbies, woodworking, running, new friends from the engineering club, people she didn't know. I'd come home late, laughing about my day, leaving her on the outside. She'd ask questions, try to join in, but I'd brush her off, polite but distant. She'd lost her place with me, and I made sure she knew it, inch by agonizing inch. The final unraveling came slow, deliberate, a symphony of my making. I invited Emily's parents over, good people, salt-of-the-earth types who adored Lily. I showed them her new projects, the bridges she'd built, while Emily sat quiet, her smiles forced. Later, I accidentally left my phone out, a photo of the trashed cabin on the screen. Her mother saw it, frowned, asked what it was. Oh, just a work thing, I said, locking eyes with Emily as she blanched. She knew I knew, but not how much, not yet. I let her stew in that limbo, her world tilting. Marcus vanished completely. Tom lost his trail, said he'd skip town, maybe the state. I didn't care. He was a broken thing, irrelevant now. Emily was my focus. I started leaving her alone more. Weekend trips with Lily, work retreats that stretched into days. She'd call, her voice small, asking when I'd be back. Soon, I'd say vague, letting her imagination fill the gaps. She stopped wearing makeup, her hair unwashed, her sketches abandoned. I'd come home to a silent house, her staring out the window, lost. I staged the final blow. I hired a woman, Sarah, a colleague's sister, to play a part. She'd call the house, ask for me, her voice warm, familiar. Emily answered once, hesitated, handed me the phone with trembling hands. I talked to Sarah in the next room, loud enough for Emily to hear laughter, murmurs, plans. Nothing real, just enough to plant doubt. Sarah sent me a gift, a scarf, left on the counter with a note. For next time. Emily found it, stared at it, didn't ask. I saw the question in her eyes. Is he doing what I did? I didn't touch her anymore. No hugs, no casual brushes. I slept on my side, a wall between us. She'd reach out sometimes, her hand hovering, then pull back. I'd wait until she slept, then slip out, sit in my truck and plan the endgame. She'd wake to an empty bed, a house full of ghosts, and me, always me, smiling like nothing had changed, knowing I'd taken everything she'd betrayed me for. Emily's collapse was a quiet thing, a slow bleed I orchestrated with precision. She'd stopped pretending, her client meetings dried up, her phone sat untouched, her sketchpads gathered dust in the corner. I'd catch her staring at me across the dinner table, her eyes hollow, searching for the man she'd married. I gave her nothing but polite nods, small talk about Lily's day, the weather, the mundane. She'd lost her spark, and I'd made sure of it. Sarah's calls kept coming. Twice a week now, her voice lilting through the house, a phantom Emily couldn't confront. The scarf stayed on the counter, untouched, a silent accusation she didn't dare voice. I took Lily on a weekend trip, camping, just the two of us, her giggles echoing through the woods as we roasted marshmallows. I sent Emily photos, Lily grinning by the fire, me teaching her to tie knots, a perfect father-daughter duo. Having a blast, I texted, knowing she'd see what I'd built without her. She replied with a weak, looks fun. Her words brittle. When we got back, She was a shadow. Hair tangled, dishes piled in the sink, the house a mess. "Missed you," she mumbled, reaching for Lily. I stepped between them, casual, said, "She's tired," and took Lily to bed myself. Emily's hand fell, her face crumpling. I started redecorating, small changes at first. New curtains she hadn't picked. A chair moved to a spot she hated. Photos of us replaced with ones of Lily and me. Freshening things up, I'd say, watching her flinch. She'd try to join in, suggest a color, a frame, but I'd shrug, say I'd already decided. Her mark on our home faded, piece by piece, until it was mine and Lily's. A space she haunted but didn't belong to. She'd sit on the couch, clutching a mug, staring at the walls like they'd betrayed her too. Marcus's absence gnawed at her. I saw it in the way she'd check her phone, then toss it aside, defeated. I'd planted one last seed. A forged email from him, sent through a dummy account, saying he'd moved on, that she'd held him back. I left it open on her laptop, waited for her to find it. She did late one night, her gasp sharp through the bedroom door. I stayed still, feigning sleep, as she stifled sobs. Let her think he'd abandoned her. Let her feel the weight of being nothing to him, too. I brought Lily's world closer to mine, sealing Emily out. I enrolled her in a summer engineering camp. Weeks away, just her and me driving upstate, her chatter filling the truck. Emily stayed home, her goodbye a weak wave from the porch, her eyes red. I'd call her daily, brief updates about Lily's projects, my voice flat, distant. "She's thriving," I'd say, knowing Emily couldn't claim that credit. When we returned, Lily burst in with blueprints and pride, barely glancing at her mother. Emily tried to hug her. Lily squirmed free, ran to show me her work. I praised her, loud and warm, while Emily shrank into the background. Sarah's role grew. I'd meet her in public, coffee shops, parks, always with Lily, always innocent, but I'd let words slip back. A neighbor saw us, mentioned it to Emily over the fence. "He's got a friend now, huh?" Emily's smile froze, her nod brittle. I'd come home whistling, Sarah's laugh still in my ears, and watch Emily's hands tremble as she set the table. She'd ask about my day, fishing. I'd say, "Oh, just hung out with a friend," and change the subject. The scarf became a fixture, draped over a chair, a constant taunt she couldn't escape. I sold her Subaru, told her the engine was shot, traded it for a pickup I'd use for work. She loved that car, her independence tied to it, and I watched her face fall as I handed her the keys to an old sedan I'd bought cheap. "It's practical," I said, shrugging. She didn't argue, just nodded, her spirit folding. I'd drive off in the pickup, leave her stranded with that clunker, her world shrinking to the house she no longer fit in. Her parents came again. I'd invited them, played the doting son-in-law. I showed them Lily's camp awards, my new projects, while Emily sat silent, picking at her food. Her dad asked why she'd stopped drawing. She mumbled about being busy. I jumped in, cheerful. "She's just taking a break. Life's full. You know?" They nodded, proud of me, blind to her ruin. She stared at her plate, knowing I'd turned her family into my allies, her last tether slipping away. Emily's unraveling became art. She'd shuffle through the house, a ghost in her own life. Unwashed hair, stained sweaters, her bracelet long gone. I'd leave traces of Sarah everywhere. A coffee cup with lipstick in the sink, a note in my pocket she'd find doing laundry. "Can't wait to see you." Emily stopped asking, just absorbed it, her silence a surrender. I'd catch her staring at me, lips parted like she wanted to speak, but I'd turn away, busy myself with Lily, leave her hanging. She'd lost the strength to fight, and I reveled in it. I staged a scene, let her overhear me on the phone with Sarah, laughing about a weekend away. I kept it vague, loud enough to echo through the hall. Emily stood in the doorway, frozen, her eyes wide. I hung up, met her gaze, smiled like nothing was wrong. "Just planning a trip," I said, breezy. She didn't ask who with, didn't need to. That night, she drank half a bottle of wine alone. her sobs muffled by the couch cushions. I let her drown in it, untouched, untouchable. Lily's birthday was the next twist. I threw a party. Engineers' kids, my friends, Sarah there too, all grins and charm. Emily hovered, trying to help, but I'd hand tasks to Sarah instead. Cutting cake, hanging streamers. Guests praised Sarah, called her a natural. Emily faded to the edges, a stranger at her daughter's celebration. Lily clung to me, to Sarah, barely noticing her mother's forced smiles. I caught Emily's eye as Sarah handed Lily a gift, a model bridge kit, and watched her break, a tear slipping down her cheek she couldn't hide. I left the cabin photos out, scattered on my desk, forgotten. She found them, stared at the wreckage, her hands shaking. "What's this?" she whispered, voice raw. I shrugged, casual. "Old project pics. Thought you'd seen them." She knew it was a lie, knew I'd been there, but I gave her no opening, no fight. She crumpled the photos, threw them away, her last thread of denial snapping. I'd taken her secret and made it mine, a trophy of her ruin. The endgame loomed, and I built it brick by brick. I moved money, our savings, her freelance earnings, into a new account she couldn't touch. "Bank error," I told her when she noticed, promising to fix it. I didn't. She'd call, get nowhere, her voice small as she begged for access. I'd nod, say I'd handle it, let her flounder. The house stayed in my name, always had, and I started papers to secure it, silent, legal moves she'd never see coming. She had nothing left to claim, not even the life she'd betrayed me for. Sarah became my shadow, real now, not just a prop. We'd meet for lunch, her hand brushing mine, her laugh filling gaps Emily couldn't. I didn't hide it. Let Emily see me leave, smell Sarah's perfume on my jacket. She'd sit up nights, waiting, her eyes red when I'd stroll in late, humming. "Good day?" she'd ask, desperate. "Great," I'd say, offering nothing more. She'd lost me to someone else, the mirror of her betrayal reflecting back, sharp and cold. I gave Lily a gift, a locket with my photo, Daddy's Girl engraved. She wore it everywhere, showed it off, while Emily watched, her own gifts. A sketchbook, pencils, ignored. I'd catch her staring at that locket, her face a mask of loss. I'd built a world with Lily, one Emily couldn't enter, her daughter slipping through her fingers like sand. She'd try to draw with her, but Lily'd run to me instead, her loyalty mine now, forged in her mother's absence. Her parents called, worried. She'd stopped answering them. I played concerned, said she'd been off, suggested they visit. They came, saw her hollow shell, blamed her, not me. "You're holding it together," her dad said, clapping my shoulder. Emily sat mute, their pity a weight she couldn't bear. I turned her into the failure, the one they mourned, while I stood tall, the hero of my own story. The final blow was a masterpiece, quiet and absolute. I filed for divorce. Papers served on a Tuesday, her signature shaky as she stared at them, uncomprehending. I'd kept it simple. Irreconcilable differences, no mention of Marcus, no hint of her betrayal. She didn't fight, couldn't, with no money, no ground to stand on. I got the house, primary custody of Lily. She got the sedan, a pittance, her freedom to drown in. She signed, her hand trembling, her eyes dead. I smiled, thanked her for making it easy, and watched her pack. She moved into a cheap apartment, dingy, small, a far cry from our porch and garden. I drive by sometimes, see her silhouette in the window, alone, staring out. Lily thrived with me. School awards, new friends, Sarah a steady presence. Emily'd call, beg to see her. I'd say maybe next week, keep her waiting. Lily'd ask about mommy less, her world full without her. My victory sealed in her indifference. I rebuilt, new paint on the house, Sarah's touch in the decor, laughter filling rooms Emily'd left silent. Neighbors praised me, the single dad who'd overcome. Emily faded from their stories, a footnote they pitted then forgot. I'd hear whispers. She tried sketching again, failed, taken a job at a diner, her hands stained with grease instead of charcoal. Marcus never resurfaced. I'd broken him beyond repair, a ghost she'd never reclaim. One night, she called, voice raw, pleading forgiveness. I messed up, she sobbed. I lost everything. I listened, let her spill it, then said, you did, and hung up. No anger, no tears, just calm, cold truth. I'd taken her life, her daughter, her home, her art, her love, and made it mine, better, brighter. She'd betrayed me with a stranger. I'd betrayed her with her own existence, twisted it until she was nothing. I slept soundly that night, Lily's locket glinting on her nightstand, the porch light glowing, my world whole again.